If you're one of the many people who have applied for a mortgage recently and your bank just looked at you and laughed and denied you, well, first of all, you are not alone, but we're going to go over in this video why that's probably happening, because more and more people are being denied all forms of credit when it comes to getting a mortgage, when it comes to getting a car loan, even when it comes to simply qualifying for a new credit card. And that is because too many people are maxed out. Too many people have too much debt compared to their income, which is called your debt to income ratio. And here's the thing, there's also a pretty big disconnect from what people think they can afford on their monthly payment versus what a lender will actually loan you to buy a home. And the reason for this is because of the formula that a lot of lenders use called the 28-36 rule. And if you haven't heard of it, what the 28-36 rule means is that you spend no more than 28% of your gross monthly income on housing costs and no more than 36% of your gross income on all of your debt combined. So 28% of that is going to be going towards your home, okay? So it doesn't leave you a lot of room to have any other types of debt like a car loan or student loan debt or anything unless you're a very high income earner. Now, this is just a general guideline. It's not like lenders strictly stay within this 28-36 rule, because if they did, half of the people who are buying homes today would never qualify. And we're going to get into some of the ways that the rules are bent here a little bit later on, because this typically applies to a conventional mortgage. So a conventional mortgage is when you're putting at least 10% down, even up to 20% down. A conventional mortgage is not a VA loan. It is not an FHA loan. It is not a USDA loan. Those are government subsidized loans. So obviously the reason that lenders follow this 28-36 rule is to basically check your ability to pay this loan back. But some lenders will even allow up to a 45% debt to income ratio on conventional loans, and even more than that, over 50% on certain borrowers that are getting an FHA or a VA loan. I've talked about this in previous videos, and it's part of the reason why a lot of people can no longer afford their house payment, because these lenders basically gave people a loan that they can't actually afford, which is why these rules are in place to begin with. So let's use this example here. If you're going to be buying a house for $500,000 and putting 20% down, which already might be way beyond what a lot of people would consider affordable. And even though that might be the case, I would definitely say this is more the norm today versus anything less than that, unless you live in a lower cost of living area. Well, let's say you're doing that, you're getting a 7% fixed rate loan, and your principal and interest payments alone on your property are going to come out to $2,210 a month. You add in another $400 to cover your property taxes and homeowner's insurance, which definitely doesn't apply if you live here in Florida, and I'll show you a real world example here to prove it. That would bring your total cost each month to $2,610. So to stay within that 28% threshold, you need to bring in about $11,600 per month, or about $140,000 per year, to be able to afford that $500,000 home. And of course, you're going to have the down payment. You're going to have closing costs and other expenses associated with moving into the house, maybe renovations, other things that need to happen in order to get the house livable. It's not like you're just qualifying and getting in and the rest is all gravy. No, there's always other expenses when it comes to buying a home. So if you go by the 28-36 rule, that would also limit your total monthly debt payments to $4,200 per month. And keep in mind, your house payment's already taken up $2,600 of it right there. It only leaves you an additional $1,600 a month or so. So say just if you had a $750 a month car payment, like a lot of people in this income bracket probably do, and you have a $500 per month student loan payment, well, that eats up pretty much all of the leftover debt allowable for you to stay within this rule, and you won't be able to have any other debt, or maybe you'll get denied. So obviously, based on the scenario we just played out, this is highly unrealistic for basically everybody, considering the median household income in the United States is not even really 80 grand a year. But here's where lenders will start bending the rules for you. Say you have an exceptional credit score, like something in the high 700s or even over 800. then they might give you the opportunity to have a higher debt to income ratio and break that 28-36 rule, because that's like a compensating factor that reduces your overall risk as a borrower in the eyes of the lender. And the thing is, most home buyers today are going to be in a situation where they basically have no choice but to spend more on their monthly housing payment than 28% of their gross take-home pay. Let's face it, we all use the internet these days, and the problem is every time you want to go onto a website or use a new service or app, you always have to agree to those service terms and conditions. And if you don't agree, you don't get to use that website, app, or whatever. Well, that's why today this video is sponsored by Delete Me. Because Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that will remove your personal information that's being sold online. And Delete Me's privacy experts remove you from hundreds of data brokers all year long. A lot of these companies are collecting your information, like your name, your address, your marital status, your past addresses, different things about you, which they then can turn around and sell themselves, or they turn it over to data brokers who sell that information for a profit. So if you're somebody who is tired of being forced to share all of your personal information with these faceless companies online, make sure you sign up for Delete Me and get 20% off your Delete Me subscription by joining today using my link down below at joindeleteme.com/boardinarrow, or use the QR code on the screen. But here's the reality, guys. Here's the reality check that everybody needs to hear, whether you like it or not. That if you can't even come close to lining up with this 28-36 rule, then there's a good chance that you are way in over your head when it comes to your finances, and you really can't afford to buy a house. And even if a lender's willing to give you a loan, this is kind of like the red flag that should tell you personally that maybe I'm not ready yet. Although, depending on your career and your job prospects and your age, you might even look at yourself and say, hey, I'm in my mid-30s, I'm almost 40 years old, and I still haven't been able to afford it. So if not now, then when am I ever going to be able to? And I think that is the decision a lot of people around my age are starting to make these days. Like looking at this and saying, you know what, look how much housing has gone up over the past 5 years. I don't care if I can barely afford it. Just like we talked about in the video where everybody's living beyond their means. This is yet another real world example of people living beyond their means in order to have something today that otherwise they fear they might never be able to have if they wait. And listen, that could be a legitimate fear. You know, you might be in a position where you went to college, you do have student loan debt, you're working a job that pays okay, and you're able to get by, but by no means are you wealthy, and there's not a whole lot of room for advancement or, much higher earning potential in your field. Then you might be somebody who's vulnerable to this way of thinking. But there are still things that you can do if you want to take the patient route. You can still improve your debt to income ratio, which is probably going to look like, paying down your debt and simultaneously increasing your income. Things that we talk about all the time here on the channel. If you have the student loans, try to get them paid off. Work overtime, get a side hustle, get it paid off. Have a car payment, get it paid off. Just doing those two things alone is going to hugely increase your borrowing potential and your ability to get approved to buy a home. And just ask anybody who bit off more than they can chew over the past several years when the housing market started going crazy. Look where these people are now. They're in a situation where they're forced to sell their home, or they just flat out can't even afford to pay anymore and are in the process of losing that home to a foreclosure because some other type of emergency came up and completely overwhelmed their finances. Like, this is becoming a way too common story, guys. And listen, you want to do that? Be my guest. It's your money, it's your finances. Everybody has the right to do things and live the life that they want to live. And sometimes people just need to make their own mistakes. It's the only way that some people learn the hard way, Unfortunately, some people need to go through the process of buying a home, seeing the expenses climb beyond what they can afford, being forced to sell that home at a loss, and, starting over. Many of you have written me who have been in this position and have learned that lesson the hard way. And as long as you actually learn from that mistake and do better next time, well, I guess that's okay. But I would rather take the approach of just avoiding it and learning from people who've already made that mistake. That's how I like to do it. But of course, there are the other things that you can do if you're headstrong and set on buying a home no matter what, but your finances aren't really in order yet, or you're not able to comply even close to this 28-36 rule. Well, then maybe you can look at buying a much more affordable home. Maybe you can look at moving to a much more affordable area. Those can be options for you as well. You can even look into buying something like a condo, a townhouse, a mobile home, something that is still your home, but is a much less expensive version of your home. That's an option too. But earlier I said I was going to show you that, if you want to buy a $500,000 house here in Florida, for example, you're going to be looking at a much higher payment than the $2,600 a month that we talked about earlier. Because take a look at this example here, guys. Here's this house for $539,000. So yeah, $40,000 over, but still, your estimated monthly mortgage payment on this house would be $3,700 a month. That's $1,100 more than what was estimated by the mortgage calculator. So it's another thing to keep in mind, as different areas of the country can vary tremendously in terms of the cost of living. A $500,000 house in Florida is not equal to a $500,000 house in Kansas City. And you should also be looking at this and asking yourself, like, okay, if I decide to go over this and be somebody that has a 45% debt to income ratio and take that mortgage anyways, how is this going to affect my other financial goals? Am I going to be able to buy a car in a couple years when I need to get it? Am I going to be able to save for retirement? Am I going to be able to afford to have a family? Those are all legitimate questions to be looking at if you're kind of looking for the shortcut and want to break these rules. Now, I saw a couple people say, and I saw this video as well, where Dave Ramsey said, this is why home prices aren't going to go down, okay? Well, first of all, I want everybody to realize that just coming out and saying that right now is already wrong, because home prices are already coming down in a lot of places. And one of those places now is in the brand new home market. Let's take a look at D.R. Horton, for example, one of the nation's largest home builders. Their share prices have been sinking for a long time. This home builder is struggling financially. Okay, share prices 1 year ago for D.R. Horton were $145 per share. Then you can see we had that huge bull market last year in 2024. They got up to about $200 a share and have now come crashing down to $121 per share. So needless to say, they're not doing too good. And their most recent earnings report came in at the same time that the newest government data shows us that the construction of new homes in March of 2025 fell by a lot more than expected, but the permits that were applied for increased. The spokesperson for D.R. Horton says that the 2025 spring selling season started slower than expected, as potential home buyers have been more cautious due to continued affordability constraints and declining consumer confidence. Sound familiar? Who else has been saying that? He also said that the company has tried to ease this weakness by increasing sales incentives, which included price cuts, but sales still slumped. So Dave Ramsey said prices aren't coming down, but the spokesperson for D.R. Horton says that they are, and they build homes for a living. So who are you going to listen to? You don't even have to listen to me, guys. I'm talking about, who do you believe, Dave Ramsey, or do you believe D.R. Horton, who builds homes and their sole business is to build and sell homes for a living? And here's something else to consider too, as a potential home buyer right now, is that home builders have been the best deal in town for the past several years now, because when you combine all of the incentives that they're giving combined with price cuts for their homes, it's literally the best deal you can get on a house today, especially when you take into account the fact that it's turnkey and everything in the house is brand new. And yeah, I'm aware that home builders have their problems and there's quality issues with some of these homes. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying for what you're getting for the price, it's hard to match that with a house on the resale market. And even they are forced to cut prices right now. So for the quarter that ended March 31st, D.R. Horton said the number of homes sold dropped 15.2% from the same period 1 year ago to 22,437 homes sold, down from the 26,456 homes sold a year ago. This is too funny, guys. Take a look at this. I saw something like that, I think in LA before. This little delivery box or something, whatever this is. There's a couple of them here. It's robots roaming around South Beach. I don't even know what they got inside, but one's called Darla One's Raphael. Wild, man. And you know the funny thing about this report from D.R. Horton, they came in 15.2% less homes sold, down from a year ago. Okay, the expectation is that it was going to be an increase, a slight increase from the same period a year ago. So they were way off on what was actually expected to happen. And who else has been way off? Basically everybody when it comes to predicting the housing market, right? Everybody's been saying that, it's just going to continue going bonkers, but it's not. D.R. Horton also reported that every region that they are in saw a drop in sales, with the Southeast being the worst, which is not really a huge surprise. And they also said here that the average price per home sold declined 2.1%. So not a huge decrease, but it's a decrease. It's not an increase. So Dave Ramsey just said that home prices aren't going to come down, but they are coming down, Dave. So D.R. Horton's also projecting that they're going to see lower sales throughout the rest of the year. And this puts the company on track to see their first yearly decline in home deliveries since 2011, in the depths of the GFC, guys. Think about that. 2025 is going to be D.R. Horton's worst sales year since 2011. I think that statement just speaks for itself. Their total revenue also went down a whopping 15.1%, which is not a surprise. That's pretty much in line with how many less homes that were sold compared to a year ago. By no means are they in danger of going out of business. But originally they projected they were going to make $36 billion this year, and now the projection has been cut down to $33 billion. So still billionaires. But I just wanted to put that out there because there's a lot of interests out there that want you to think and believe that you'll never see a reduction in home prices, and they're already wrong, guys. They just are. And I'm not saying that there aren't places where prices are still going up. I have repeated myself like a parrot on this channel, acknowledging that yes, there are still places, there are still markets where prices are going up, but this is no longer the norm. And if you're willing to move, like we talked about earlier, making certain sacrifices to be able to buy a home, you can buy in an area where prices are coming down. No one's forcing you to live in an area where prices continue to go up. And since all of the news is usually so depressing on this channel, I want to talk about something that's not really that depressing, but more interesting than anything, especially if you are Floridian. Because Florida has now reached a historic milestone in tourism. We just hit an all-time record of 15.5% share of the domestic vacation market in 2024. So 15.5% of all vacations locally, domestically in the United States were right here in Florida. This is up 1 percentage point from 2023's figures as well. So more and more people continue to visit Florida. So Florida is the top tourist destination for domestic travel. And not only that, but Florida is also the top travel destination worldwide. In 2024, Florida received a record-breaking 143 million visitors, guys. So nowhere else in the world, no other travel destination anywhere received more visitors than in the state of Florida. And this can be a blessing or a curse depending on how you look at this as a local. Like living in Miami, it can get pretty annoying. A lot of people come and visit here. But I understand that there's a whole host of businesses around here that cater to those individuals that come down and also take advantage of them. Let's be real. That's what I wanted to kind of get to here. That's the not so depressing part about it. Because with Florida now breaking its own record 5 years in a row since 2019 for tourism, if you live here, obviously the cost of living has gone berserk, but there are ways you can take advantage of this, guys. People are coming here more than ever, apparently, according to the data, and you can get your slice of the pie. You can have a side hustle. You can have a business that caters to people who come here. I even met somebody before that, didn't own Airbnbs, but did like the Airbnb experiences, gave people tours around Miami and gave them like yoga classes and things like that in order to like cater to what tourists coming down here wanted to experience while they were in Miami. And as a local, if you know the area, you can do things like that. You can also do this in other areas of Florida. That's like a zero overhead business that somebody could do right now to make extra money in 2025. And I'm not saying that's for everybody. I'm just saying it's one example of somebody being able to turn this tourism that we get here into a profit. Even in the fourth quarter of 2024, we had 33.1 million visitors visit the state of Florida, and that's, the winter, the peak season when everybody comes down here. This is also the highest number that was ever recorded for a fourth quarter period in Florida. And that number made up about 30 million domestic travelers and 2.5 million overseas visitors. So the reality is it's not all doom and gloom, guys. Living here in Florida is challenging, it's tough, it's expensive. There's a lot of things that go into it, and you need to make a lot more than the average person if you want to be here. But there are ways to do it. That's just one small example that I share with you that you can do. You can do anything else. Look at the things people spend money on and look at what you like to do and find a way to build a business around that. Even me, even though I don't focus so much on Florida as a whole like I used to on my YouTube channel, a lot of people watch this channel just because they like to see different areas that I walk through here in Florida. That if you're still, up in the Midwest or somewhere where it's freezing right now, that this looks amazing. People like that. So even though that's not my main goal, it's just an example of another thing that you can offer somebody that is only available here in Florida. But be realistic, guys. If you are going to be buying a house, try to stick close to this 28-36 rule. Be mindful of what you can truly afford. Try to really put yourself in a future mindset thinking, is this going to be a good decision 5 years from now to make that good choice? And, let me know what you decide. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, especially if this video helped you in any way. Feel free to share it with somebody. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.